Sonic, how do we come to know the truth about our world? How do we figure out what's real and what's fake and fantasy? How do we figure all of this out, Big Sonic? What do we do to figure out the truth? And how do we come to know what reality is and what is actually real and what's fake and fantasy? What types of tools do we use? How do we figure these types of things out, Big Sonic? Small Sonic, well, quite frankly, we rely on like our own intuition, and we use our mental faculties and our eyes and etc. and stuff to kind of see the world around us, and then we kind of figure things out like that. We use our eyes and we conduct experiments and stuff, and that's how we figure things out via science and etc. and stuff. But Big Sonic, science, so is that how we figure out what's the reality and truth and what's fantasy and fake? What about something else? Can't we just like figure things out in our head? Why do we have to like do experiments and use observations and etc. and stuff, Big Sonic? Small Sonic, you can try and figure things out in your head. That's, I would consider that to be philosophy, trying to figure things out in your head. But science is just simply more practical, observing the world around us and doing experiments. That's something we can all see and check and stuff, and we can correlate things, and we can match different pieces of evidence together. If we just try and figure things out in our heads by thinking about different types of ideas and figuring out trying to see which ideas are the best, that's really counterproductive, and that's not really going to even correlate properly to reality and stuff. And we're going to be endlessly debating about things that are completely beyond any type of practical approach and observable phenomena and physical touching. I don't know. Big Sonic, is science better than philosophy? Is doing observations and experiments in real life, is that better than just kind of figuring things out in our heads and conceptualizing different types of ideas and stuff and thoughts and forms and all that type of stuff? What is better, Big Sonic? Well, Small Sonic, philosophy versus science. Science is so much more practical, Small Sonic. Doing experiments, observing the world around us, etc. and stuff, coming to firm conclusions based off observable phenomenon and tangible evidence. That's so much better than just kind of endlessly wondering about things inside of our heads. Small Sonic, philosophy is kind of useless in so many different ways. We just thinking about things in your head, trying to just think it's so useless. It's completely impractical. I believe that the best way to figure out what's the truth and reality and etc. is to quite frankly just conduct experiments and use our our eyes and stuff to see the world around us, and through observation and experimentation we'll figure out the truth and what is the actual reality behind this world and stuff. Big Sonic, so you're saying that the way we figure out the truth and reality is by using science, not philosophy, not by thinking about things in our heads. Small Sonic, you can think about things in your head. That is sort of the issue with philosophy. It's so conceptual. It's out of touch with reality. It's all mental masturbation. Quite frankly, it's very pointless and useless. It's never going to be practical in any meaningful way. Philosophy is kind of just mental masturbation, and that's why philosophy has kind of it's not really even that relevant anymore, is it? Big Sonic, but how do we figure out the truth and reality? Do we just use our observation and experimentation? Is that what we have to do? We don't figure things out in our heads. Philosophy, we have to use science, not philosophy. Big Sonic. Small Sonic, quite frankly, you can do whatever you want to do. The truth and reality is going to come to you if you try and want it to come to you, and you're open to it being close to you and stuff. Science versus philosophy versus science. I believe that trying to figure out what's the truth and reality is just better to try and figure out what's the truth and reality by doing experiments and observation. Philosophy is just mental masturbation. It's quite frankly, Small Sonic, is very useless and impractical and pointless and out of touch with reality. The best way to figure out the truth and reality is through observations and experimentation and etc. and seeing what things add up and what correlates with what. That is far more better as a tool. That's a better tool to use to figure out the truth and what is our reality about and stuff. So Big Sonic, we should use science, not philosophy then. Pretty much, Small Sonic, that's the best way to figure out the truth and reality. So we have to through observation and experience. That's how we're going to figure out the truth and reality. Pretty much small sonic, and we have to like correlate data and all that type of stuff. What about figuring things out in our heads? What about like thinking about things in our heads and like thinking about things constantly? Wouldn't that kind of help? Small sonic, that's just mental masturbation and daydreaming. Surely you know that's not going to be very practical. Oh, I'm going to have a good old think about this, Big Sonic, but thank you for your contributions to this discussion and your philosophical insights, and that's about it. Okay, Small Sonic. Oh man, he's getting very tiring to be around, and he's asking all these difficult questions and my brain hurts now. I'm gonna go and think about this as well and go to sleep. Hey yo! The topic of this video is going to be about philosophy versus science, science versus philosophy, philosophy versus science. This is such an interesting topic. It's so important as well, because this topic is going to really help us now figure out what is like the ultimate truth and reality and etc. and stuff. Science versus philosophy, philosophy versus science. This is such an important topic to contemplate on, to think about carefully and stuff. Philosophy versus science, science versus philosophy. This is such an important topic to think about, and okay, to quickly like define words, to define things like what is philosophy, what is science, and etc. And so philosophy is basically, I'll say it's just like sort of like trying to like philosophy is basically, to put it into my own words, it's just like you like think of things, you conceptualize things in your head and stuff. I don't know. You kind of, I don't know. It's kind of like using our imagination to figure out what's around us. I don't know. That might sound, does that sound right? I don't know. Using philosophy is, us human beings, we use our imagination, our brains, and we just kind of like conceptualize things, and we try and use our imaginations to figure out what's around us, to figure out the world. Isn't that what philosophy is? Obviously, there's academic definitions and etc. and stuff. Actually, maybe I should try and like quickly read like an academic definition. Let me just quickly see what is philosophy, and like in the most appropriate way to say it. What in the most appropriate sense, what is philosophy? Let me just quickly philosophy is philo. Okay, I'm kind of being a dumbass using our imagination, because that's why I see, I just have like this kind of like this idea of like philosophy as being like, you know, like the Greeks and stuff like that, and they were like just thinking about things. I feel like that's what philosophy is, but the actual more academic definition is basically the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. Love of wisdom, obviously, in literally the word philosophy, if we want to like study etymology and stuff like that, it literally, philosophy translates to like the love of wisdom. In a broad sense, philosophy is an activity people understand fundamental truths about themselves, in the world in which they live, and their relationships to the world and to each other. Maybe I'm being kind of a dumbass then. I'm saying that philosophy is like us human beings, we use our imaginations to figure out the world around us, which is kind of fucking retarded when you look at the more academic definitions. Basically, philosophy is like the love of wisdom. That's why it translates to philo. I believe that's Greek or something Latin or something similar. Philo, love, and philosophy, wisdom, love of wisdom, philosophy. That's what philosophy kind of, the etymology translates to love of wisdom. I'm being a dumbass. Why did I say like philosophy is like us human beings, we use our imaginations to figure out the world around us? Because I always thought to myself that philosophy was like about, it was just about ideas and stuff like that. Ideas, isn't that what philosophy sort of was about? I always have like that kind of stereotypical view on philosophy. That's just about, philosophy is just like ideas and stuff like that. And us human beings, we use our ideas and stuff, and we kind of like trying to figure out like different like types of things in our heads, and then we try and like put it into like reality, real life. That's why I always thought that philosophy was, that it's just us human beings, we use like our imagination sort of like that. I don't know, because ideas, I just thought it was like about ideas and stuff, philosophy and stuff, I don't know. Obviously philosophy, if you look at the etymology of the word, it's the love of wisdom. That's why it could translate to, I don't know. I always thought that philosophy was just about like ideas and stuff, and us human beings using our imaginations and etc. and stuff to try and like piece together the world around us and to figure out what is like the ultimate truth and reality. It's kind of, obviously it's very, when we're discussing like word definitions, it's like you can go and look at the more academic definitions, but in my opinion, like just at least from my own perspective and stuff, and from like what I know in my head, I always thought that philosophy was just like sort of like about like ideas and stuff, and ideas and our imagination and etc. and stuff like that. I didn't think that it was like, I don't know, but philosophy, like love of wisdom, perhaps maybe it's something to do that to do with that. Anyway, I don't want to waste too much time on like defining to you the word philosophy. Basically, the pursuit, like it's like us human beings, we use our ideas to figure out what is truth. I don't know, is it like the pursuit of wisdom or knowledge and stuff, or the study of nature? I don't know. There's so many types of definitions that you can use. I don't know. So this is why it's so tricky. I don't want to waste too much time, but these sorts of definitions, that's what philosophy is about. Like philosophy, love of wisdom, pursuit of knowledge, trying to study like nature and stuff, using our ideas to like figure out what is truth. That's how I would that's how I would define philosophy. Using us human beings, we think about things and then we try and figure out the truth. That's what philosophy sort of is about. I don't know. Obviously, so many different definitions. Why is science though? Science is like a lot. I'm actually gonna see what the academic definition of science is. Science. So science is just the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained. So science is all about like experimentation, observation, and yeah, that's basically it. Science, to put it into my own words, science is just about observation and experimentation and tangible evidence and proof. That's how I would like define the word science. Science is about observation, experimentation, and tangible proof. That's what I would, in my own words, that's how I would like quickly, like in a nutshell, define the word science. Science is just about observation, experimentation, and tangible proof. And okay, so science versus philosophy versus science, in regards to like finding out what is the truth, what is better. This is kind of like very stupid because they kind of like the science, philosophy, and science. They kind of relate to the same thing. They kind of are like similar in so many different types of ways. Philosophy and science basically is like a type of philosophy. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a dumbass. Obviously, word definitions is all subjective, and you can like kind of come to your own conclusions, and you might have your own perspectives and opinions. I believe that science versus philosophy versus science. I believe that, in a very practical sense, I believe science is superior to philosophy. If we kind of dichotomize these two things, science and philosophy, science, we dichotomize these two things. I believe science is far superior to philosophy in regards to like, in a very practical sense, because philosophy sort of is just about like ideas and stuff. Obviously, I know there's like different types of definitions and etc. and stuff. There's different types of definitions. Science, philosophy versus science, philosophy versus science, I don't know. Word definitions and stuff like that, it's all subjective, and you might have your own perspectives and opinions. But I believe that science is just far more practical, superior compared to like philosophy. Philosophy is fucking it's very impractical. Is it impractical? I don't know. Because what is philosophy? Philosophy is us human beings. We use our ideas and we try and like figure out the world around us using our ideas. I don't know. We use our ideas and stuff. We try and figure out what's around us. I don't know. Is that philosophy? How else would you define philosophy? How else would you define philosophy? Philosophy is about like using like our mental faculties and kind of piecing together the world around us. I don't know. That's kind of like very dumb. Isn't philosophy and science, aren't they like together in the same way? You could easily like see them as being the same thing as well. I don't know. Philosophy, the pursuit of knowledge, the study of nature, all of that type of stuff. Obviously, word definitions is all like very it's very hard to like to even like properly define what the word philosophy is and what the word science is, because word definitions are very tricky, and there's so many different types of definitions you can use. Philosophy versus science. I believe, in a very practical sense, science is superior to philosophy for sure. I do believe that. I believe philosophy, if we're gonna have like this type of approach to philosophy where it's just like about us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we want to try and we just have ideas and we try and argue about which ideas are better, and that's like, if you want to kind of see philosophy in this type of way, then I do believe that science, in a very practical sense, is like far superior to philosophy, because typically philosophy is just about like, we have like ideas in our heads and we us human beings, we argue about which ideas are better. And how is that like very practical? It's like very stupid and subjective and like pointless. Ultimately, philosophy, if we're going to have this type of approach to philosophy, because there's so many different ways that you can define the word philosophy, there's so many different types of word definitions, but if you want to have this type of approach to the word philosophy, that philosophy is that us human beings, we have ideas inside our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. If you want to have that type of approach to the word philosophy, then I believe that science is far superior to philosophy. Science, like, because science is about observation, experimentation, and tangible proof, that is like far superior to philosophy. Just us human beings, we have ideas on our heads and we argue about which ideas are better. That is so pointless. It's so pointless, because how can you ground that intellectually? If like two people have like ideas in their heads, how can you like ground that and make that practical and stuff like that? Ideas which are like inside our heads. Philosophy versus science. How can you make philosophy is like about us human beings. If you want to have this type of approach to philosophy where it's just us human beings, we have like ideas on our heads and we argue about which ideas are better, that's pointless. Then philosophy is useless, it's pointless, it's impractical, it's very stupid. Science, which is just about experimentation, observation, and like tangible proof, that is like far superior. It's all obviously you have your own opinions and like perspectives and stuff like, I don't know. Science versus philosophy, I do believe, in my opinion at least, that science is probably far superior to philosophy. Philosophy is like very, especially if you want to define philosophy in this type of way, that us human beings, we have ideas on our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better, then I do believe that science is far superior to philosophy. Philosophy is impractical, pointless. Ultimately, philosophy just leads to nowhere. If us human beings, we have ideas on our heads and we argue about which ideas are better, how's that going to lead to anything meaningful? It's very stupid if you think about it carefully. Philosophy, obviously the word definitions, there's so many different types of word definitions for the word philosophy. Philosophy, love of wisdom. You can see the word philosophy in so many different types of ways, but if you want to see it in this type of way, as human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we argue about which ideas are better, that type of way, then I believe philosophy is ultimately pointless. I believe philosophy is not going to lead to anywhere meaningful. Science, obviously science is literally the child of philosophy. That's like a nice little quote you can take from me. Science is the child of philosophy, because philosophy is kind of like a predecessor to science, like a mother or father figure to like science. If philosophy did not exist, these kinds of types of traditions of philosophy, science would not exist. Science is like a child of philosophy. So I don't know, they're kind of like so related in so many different types of intimate ways. At least in my opinion though. Philosophy, if it's just about like us human beings, we have ideas on our heads and we try and argue about which like ideas are better, if that's what philosophy is about, then I do believe that philosophy is completely pointless, it's useless, it leads to nowhere meaningful. Us human beings, we just have ideas on our heads and we just try and argue about which ideas are better, that leads to nowhere. Science, which is like far more practical, science is literally about like observation, experimentation, tangible proof. That's what science is sort of about. I don't know. There's so obviously word definitions, you can define things in so many different types of ways. But science, if it's just like about observation, like experimentation, tangible proof, that is like, wouldn't that be more like meaningful? Because it's not just about subjective opinions. Because I do believe philosophy, like if you want to have this type of approach to philosophy, that us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we argue about which ideas are better, that's so fucking retarded. Philosophy, if you want to see philosophy in that type of way, obviously word definitions, there's so many different types of ways to define philosophy. Some people would say that philosophy literally is just the pursuit of like knowledge, and I don't know, that might be meaningful. But there's so many types of ways to define philosophy. But in my opinion, and like, at least I always had like this type of very stereotypical view of philosophy, that philosophy was sort of just about like how us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. That's what I always thought philosophy was about. And that kind of like really, that made me believe that philosophy is kind of like fucking pointless and retarded. If it's just about us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better, that is pointless to me. That is pointless to me. Us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are pointless. I mean, better, I'm kind of mumbling my words. Us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we argue about which ideas are better. That is fucking pointless. That is so pointless. It leads to nowhere. Which is why I do believe that philosophy, I mean, the Greeks, they did invent some things, I don't know, but they didn't really invent a whole lot. Like, especially compared to like the science, when science was like getting very strongly like put together in like the 18th, 19th, early 20th century, then that's when a lot of innovation took place and stuff like that. I do believe science versus philosophy versus science versus philosophy. I believe that science is just so far ahead of philosophy. Again, word definitions are tricky. There's so many different types of ways you can like define the word philosophy and science, etc. and stuff. But philosophy, if you want to see philosophy in this type of way, that philosophy is about like us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. If you want to like see philosophy in that type of way, then it's kind of philosophy, like us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. That is so fucking pointless. That leads to nowhere. And I do believe that's why, like, for a lot of human history, that's why we weren't getting things done properly, because we because philosophy is literally, it's about, there's so many different types of word definitions. Obviously, because you could define the word philosophy as being like the pursuit of knowledge. There's so many different tricky definitions for the word. There's so many word definitions. So I don't get angry at me for like kind of like misrepresenting these types of words and stuff like that. I don't know, because I'm just coming from my type of stereotype, because I always had the stereotypical view of philosophy that it's just like us, like a bunch of people, we have like ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. That's always what I thought philosophy was about, and I always thought that philosophy was so impractical, useless. It leads to nowhere meaningful. Science, philosophy versus science, science versus philosophy. It's so important. This is like such an important topic to carefully think about. Philosophy versus science, science versus philosophy. I do believe that science, again, in a very practical sense, science for sure is so much more superior to philosophy. In a very practical sense, science is about observation, experimentation, tangible proof. How can that not be superior to philosophy? Philosophy is like very impractical, pointless, useless. Science is so far ahead of philosophy. Philosophy is very impractical, pointless. I do believe that. Yes, I do believe philosophy is sort of useless. Again, there's so many different types of word definitions that you can kind of like think about. I always had this stereotypical view of philosophy, that philosophy was just sort of about us human beings. We have like ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. That's what I always thought philosophy was about. And that's why I always thought that philosophy was fucking useless, because like us human beings, we all have like ideas in our heads. It's literally impossible. How can you like prove that your ideas are better? It's kind of in a very objective sense, because like it's subjective. Like idea is like literally subjective. Idea is like something in your head. Philosophy versus science, science versus philosophy. This is why I believe that science, in a very practical sense, is like it's far better than philosophy. Philosophy, if you want to see it in this type of way, that us human beings, we have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. If you want to see philosophy in that type of way, then I believe that philosophy is fucking useless. It's pointless. It leads to nowhere. Obviously, philosophy, way of life. You can also see it like as a type of like, I don't know. It's kind of like very pointless to me. I don't know. Philosophy versus science, science versus philosophy. In terms of like figuring out the objective world, I do believe science is far superior to philosophy. Science is far superior to philosophy in terms of like what is science about? Science is about experimentation, observation, tangible proof, and tangible evidence. That science is about these types of things. Then I do believe that science, if science is about these, obviously there's so many different types of word definitions, but science is about like observation, experimentation, tangible proof. That probably far outshines like philosophy, because I always had this stereotypical view of philosophy that it's just, philosophy is about like us human beings, like people, we have like ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. That is so fucking stupid and pointless to me. I don't know. That's so pointless and stupid to me. You gotta have your own opinions. I do hope that you do have your own opinions. Obviously, I do encourage you to have your own opinions and perspectives. And you might think that I'm kind of like a dumbass. I don't know. Hopefully, you don't think I'm kind of a dumbass. I'm trying to make sense of these types of things. But philosophy versus science. Philosophy versus science. Philosophy versus science. Philosophy versus science. Science, in a very practical sense, in terms of like figuring out the objective world, I believe science is far superior to philosophy. Philosophy is like, if philosophy, like, there's so many like word definitions are tricky, and you can define the word philosophy in so many different types of ways. But I always thought that I always had this stereotypical view of philosophy, that philosophy was just about like us human beings. We have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. That's why I always thought philosophy was like about. I always had that type of stereotypical view of philosophy, that philosophy is literally about us human beings. We have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. That is fucking retarded. That is so dumb. That is so fucking stupid to me. Philosophy versus science. I'm gonna say it. Science is far superior to philosophy. Philosophy is very stupid. I mean, word definitions are tricky, and there's so many different types of ways you can define these sorts of words. Philosophy, science. There's so many ways you can define these types of words. Yeah, that's why the topic of this video is very tricky. I'm kind of mumbling with my words because philosophy, science. There's so many ways you can define these types of words. But philosophy, in the sense that like I always had this very stereotypical view of philosophy that it's just about us human beings. We have like ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. I always had that type of like stereotype in my head about philosophy, that philosophy is like about us human beings. We have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. If that is what philosophy is, then I believe that science is like far superior to philosophy. Science, in a very practical sense, science is far superior to philosophy. What is science about? What is science? Science about
observation, experimentation, tangible proof. I do believe that far outshines philosophy, because obviously word definitions are tricky, and there's so many different types of ways to define the word philosophy in science. But I always, again, if you want to have this type of approach to philosophy, because I always had this stereotypical view of philosophy, this kind of stereotypical like understanding of philosophy, that philosophy is about us human beings. We have ideas in our heads and we try and argue about which ideas are better. If that's what philosophy is, then philosophy is fucking retarded. We try and argue about which ideas are better. I don't know. Maybe I'm the dumbass. Maybe I'm retarded, because obviously philosophy, like science, is the child of philosophy. So maybe philosophy isn't completely useless, but it's not very practical. In a very practical sense, I do believe that science is superior to philosophy in terms of like figuring out the objective world. And that's so important. Science, in a very practical sense, it's like more important, like it's more superior to philosophy in regards to like figuring out the objective world. Obviously, well, philosophy is still important. Without philosophy, science would not exist, because science, I do believe that science is like the child of philosophy. But still, philosophy versus science, in a very practical sense, at least in my opinion, I do believe that science is far superior to philosophy in regards to like figuring out the objective world, and that's about it.